say a new RSV vaccine could help save lives right here in the tri-states. RSV is a severe respiratory illness that kills thousands of people every year in the U.S. While most infections are mild, the virus can be severe for younger and older people. Doctors say this new shot would be focused on those who are older and have pre-existing conditions.
It's really to protect those of us over 65, people with significant lung disease, whether it be COPD or asthma, people with heart disease such as congestive heart failure, and people whose immune systems may be compromised.
The CDC is expected to meet and decide on final approval of the vaccine in June. As